Interrupting all programs. This is Radio Clash from Pirate Satellite, orbiting your living room, cashing in the Bill of Rights. From an undisclosed location with your hosts, Brothers Joseph and Lee. Brother Joseph, take it away.
All right, everybody. Great to have you back. We got another exciting episode here and a lot of fun things to talk about. I just love where this channel's going so far, and these topics that we're coming up with are pretty great. We're going to continue to bring this great content for you. Uh, Brother Lee, how you doing?
Brother Joseph, I am doing great, man, and I mirror your enthusiasm here. I think that we're going to be covering some timely topics, but also some overall information that is good foundation just to understand the world we're living in and the things that we fortunately or not have to deal with in this current year.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, it's wild out there these days. We have news coming in hourly of just different things happening around the globe, and it's interesting to see. So on this, quick overview on what we're going to be, touching on. I'll just briefly go over it. We're going to talk about some UFO stuff. We're going to talk about voting in general. We're going to talk about breakaway civilizations or DUMBs, which are an acronym for underground military bases. And first, we're going to kick it off with, I think everybody sees this in politics right now, in Trump world, in MAGA, everyone sees this. But what is going on with this Trump pivot away from all of his promises and everything he's doing to kind of piss off his base? It seems like all he has left these days are neocons and boomers and
Hmm.
maybe the state of Israel and the supporters there. But all the people who fought really hard for him. You've got Thomas Massey, you've got MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene, you got Lauren Boebert. Uh, I mean, the list
Tucker,
goes on. Tucker
yeah,
Carlson,
they're out.
so many people. Even God, there's this funny comedian, JD. Can't think of his last name. But
Salinger, or
yeah,
is he redheaded?
yeah, redheaded guy. I
Yeah.
mean, he has been just putting out incredible posts lately on Twitter. And he used to be one of Trump's, biggest advocates,
Sure.
fought hard for him. I mean, all these people got him elected. I mean, you even have Theo Vaughn, Joe Rogan, that whole independent base that really
Hmm.
swung this last election, poof, gone. And Trump lost all of it. And, I'm just going to kind of go through some of this stuff because, what we're saying is not unwarranted here. I mean, you got Thomas Massey. That pissed off a lot of people. That just happened this week.
Yeah.
You got Tucker Carlson. I mean, Tucker Carlson even just said with this Thomas Massey loss, it was, he said, and quote unquote, he said, obviously the death of MAGA. And basically, he's pointedly directed at Miriam Adelson, who's Trump's biggest donor, Israeli-born, you know, self-described fervent neocon, funding all of this, and $50 million to a Kentucky congressional seat. I mean, what's going on here? Um, to push it even more, we've got this Iran war. Trump ran on no new wars. That was his whole big thing, and not being not so much of being an isolationist, but just not getting into these wars. And all of a sudden we got Israel, you know, pushing us into this stuff, and Trump seems to be jumping at all of it. And you look at all of his donors, and APAC and the Israeli lobby, they represent 80% of his cabinet right now, which is terrifying.
Well, he said this week that he's got a 99% approval rating in Israel. Maybe he'll run for the prime minister of Israel after he vacates the White House. I mean, that's insane.
It's wild. I mean, I mean, obviously, he, his advisors around him are handpicked by him, and man, they are just leading him down an interesting path. And I'm just going to keep going through some of these things that have happened because, like, just with Iran, you've got Joe Kent, who Trump lauded this guy, loved him, and now after the whole Iran thing and Joe Kent stepped down, Trump just starts bashing him. She's bashing Laura Boebert, and that, that ties into the next thing we were talking about, all the Epstein purge. And, only four Republicans signed the discharge petition. It was Massey, Nancy Mace, Boebert, and MTG. And Trump went then has and since then has gone after every single one of them. When Marjorie Taylor Greene quit Congress in January, Trump called her a traitor and a disgrace when she was one of his. She was a big reason why he got elected. I mean, she was a warrior for him. Um, you know, it seems like this whole Epstein class is running the insane asylum now, and yeah, it's scary. I mean, you got Trump even saying, he called the Epstein story a Democrat hoax, but
Yeah.
you've got someone in prison for it. You've got all these victims out there, and we're just supposed to pretend that none of it happened. And you've got the kind of the cat turds of the world and these MAGA idiots. Uh,
The
just
puppets.
parenting whatever crap that they say, and they flip flop so much because Trump flip flops so much,
Yeah.
and seeing that progression has been, I mean, it's scary. It should be a wake up call to everybody that, politics is the dirtiest game. It is the dirtiest game in the world, and you can't trust anybody. And all these people, I mean, I was with Trump since he went down that escalator. I've been a huge Trump
Yeah.
supporter, and I have just ne I'm just so disappointed in what I'm seeing. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I suppose there's been one or two wins there. Like he has slowed
Close the
down.
border.
Yeah, he's closed the border. There's been a couple things, but not, we're the, mass deportations and like,
Yeah. None.
on top of that, the Doge, he came in there saying, that we're going to deploy Elon Musk and use Doge and use all this analytics to go in there and root out all this crap and corruption. And, that lasted for what, 3 months?
Well, I would say that that was actually a Trojan horse to bring in Palantir and get them
Yeah.
access to a lot of the different databases. And like we spoke about last time, bringing in these different siloed parts of, we discussed the security state, but different parts of the government, be it the IRS or any of the other agencies, to where all of that is conglomerated now. And I will mention uh, we're kind of we got away from Epstein, but that was really what got me off the Trump train. Honestly, was when he said, "Yes, it's a Democrat hoax, and if you're my supporters and you actually care about this, if you care about justice for abused, possibly murdered, ritually sacrificed children, I don't want your support." I said, "Fine,
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
fine." And then it went downhill from there. Iran, the list is long.
Yeah. 100%. And, day one promises. He said, and this was a quote, he said, starting on day one, I will end inflation and make America affordable again. And I don't know, man. You look around, it is expensive.
I drive a
Warren
diesel.
banking, yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. My wife drives a Lexus, and she's paying. We're in Florida. She's paying $5 a gallon for premium gas. The Warren Banking Committee just came out with a study, and families paid $2,120 more in 2025 because of his policies. And the bottom 20% paid an extra $950, which equaled 5% of their income. Electricity in 2026 is up 6.3% year over year. Beef is up 15%. Utility gas is up 9.8%. The tariffs added 0.83 percentage points to inflation. Without them, we'd already be under the Fed's 2% target. The manufacturing sector has shrunk every month since Liberation Day.
Hmm.
2025 had nearly zero job growth. Trump's response, he called affordability a hoax and told Americans, and these are quotes. He called it a hoax, and then, and I quote, he said, "Don't Americans don't be dramatic."
Didn't
I
they call
mean,
them panicans or something like
Panicans,
that?
yeah,
Oh,
which
and
is
and
cringe. I mean, pure
well,
cringe.
and the tariffs have now been refunded, but they're not going to refund me the prices that they increased to cut
Yeah,
their profit margin. So that's
yeah.
just gone to the wind. It's not even in the Treasury's coffers.
Yep. So the consumers paid all the tariffs, because the companies raised it, and then when Trump lost that Supreme Court ruling, he had to pay those tariffs back, which are happening secret, like nobody's talking about it, but the government's giving all that money back. and it's not going to the consumer. It's
Yeah.
just like another COVID transfer of wealth that is orchestrated. And when you tie in who not Bernanke, but who's uh who's Trump's is it? It's not chief of staff, but it's his
Economic advisory.
economic
Yeah,
advisory.
the
It's
guy who lived next to Epstein. What's his name?
exactly, and he actually put a um he kind of put a hedge against those tariffs that
Yeah,
if they were like
yeah.
paid back, he'd get 1.5% of it or something like that. Um, and so he made an absolute killing off this and it not working.
Howard
Um,
Lutnick.
yeah, Howard Lutnick, thank you. And so, he made billions off that. And he was Epstein's boy. Like they lived next to each other, the deep ties. I mean, it's crazy. And then, other things that make me mad just about this whole thing is like glyphosate. The whole Maha movement has gone absolutely nowhere. February 18th, 2026, Trump invoked the Defense Production Act to boost domestic glyphosate production, citing national security. And this is an active ingredient in Roundup. It's classified by the WHO as a probable human carcinogen. Um, this executive order grants legal immunity to the chemical manufacturers, meaning the cancer victims can't sue Bayer anymore. It came out one day later that Bayer proposed a $7 billion settlement to resolve tens of thousands of Roundup cancer lawsuits. And yeah, pretty convenient timing there. And on top of it, now the Forest Service is bombarding national forests with Roundup. And there was an investigation found that 8,000 sprayings covered a 250,000 acres in California alone. 90% of forest spraying is happening in the southern states.
Why? What's the justification?
To save money on conifer release. Hand clearing costs cost 3 times more than chemical spraying. Forest workers and locals describe sprayed areas as virtual dead zones with no bees and no flowers. I mean, it's crazy, man. And so Trump also approved a new Bayer phosphate mine on 1,800 acres of public land in Idaho, which is the precursor mineral for glyphosate. And it's the direct opposite of everything that RFK Jr. and the Maha movement campaigned on. Kennedy, publicly endorsed it anyway, which is insane. And, Maha toxicologists call it outrageous and unacceptable. I mean, it's madness. And these are, again, it's just madness. I mean, glyphosate isn't allowed, a lot of our food isn't allowed even to be, consumed in Europe and different places because of this crap. And we just double down on it. On top of that, this week, just this week, May 18th, the EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin announced the agency will eliminate federal drinking water standards for four PFAS chemicals: Gen X, PFNA, PFBS, and PFHXS. And so now they're just dumping all this stuff into our drinking water. This also delays compliance for the two worst ones, the PFOAs and the PFOS, pushing the deadline from 2029 to 2023. These are forever chemicals. They don't break down. They accumulate in your body. And the CDC says 97% of Americans already have them in our blood. They're linked to cancer, liver damage, immune suppression, reproductive harm, developmental issues in children, and up to 105 Americans or 105 million Americans drink water that exceed the now contaminated 2024 standards. I mean, this is
Wow.
what are we doing here? You
Yeah, I
know,
mean, it's to your point, it's the exact opposite of what he ran on. It's
yep,
not just he's fudging a little bit and oh, we can't get these certain things through Congress. It is 180 from what he ran on and why he was elected and why he got those more independent votes in this 2024 election.
100%. I mean, everybody was expecting sweeping change and everything that he ran on. And I mean, there was a, mandate from the people. Like we wanted to see, we want Fauci and Bill Gates. And now we have this whole tick thing that's happening, which is directly tied to Bill
Yeah.
Gates and all of his studies with ticks. Farmers seeing ticks drop from airplanes, that are causing alpha gal syndrome, which allow you, won't let you eat red meat and or even byproducts or use them on your skin. And there's, it's in everything. So yeah, it's a very interesting, scary situation where, I don't know if it's, I've heard a lot of people say Trump is compromised, by the Epstein files, but there's another thing that a lot of people don't talk about. And a few years back, um, I'm going to look on and get the exact dates for you, but a few years back, the CIA outsourced all of its spying and basically all of its covert operations through Tel Aviv and through Mossad. And so they've been running the majority of all of our basically CIA. And so we've got a deeper connection with them. And you wonder why they say they're our greatest ally and all this is because they are contracted to basically run surveillance. And the reason a country would outsource or United States would outsource its surveillance is because the CIA and the United States cannot, by constitutionally, spy on their
Hmm.
own, citizens. And so now if they have an outside firm doing it, they can. And that you have, Palantir, who's leading the charge.
Bringing it all together so that they can have uh, a bird's eye view of exactly what's going on everywhere with everyone at all times.
Yep. And I mean, look, just a quick recap. We've got a neocon war with Iran, legal immunity for big chemical, dead drinking water standards, Epstein cover up, dead Doge, and the worst affordability crisis in this generation in years. And, he campaigned against all of that. And all the people who helped him get there and spoke up when he pivoted, he has attacked and gone after. And to see, you look at, I believe it's called the Freedom Score and Freedom or Liberty Score or something like that. And Thomas Massey was like 98%, where you've got all these people that Trump are getting behind and backing, like Ted Cruz and all them at like 40 and 50%.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, even tonight, I was just looking at Twitter before we jumped on here, and they're saying that we're close to a ceasefire with Iran, and it's basically the situation of the two main components there were that the Strait of Hormuz is open and that they don't have nuclear weapons. So basically, we've gone back to what it was
Yeah,
prior to him launching
before
this
the war.
war. Yeah, before the war, which cost you know all the billions of dollars and all this you know increased pricing across everything. And so it's what are we doing here? The whole thing is just absolute bananas.
Yeah, it's a shame what's happening, and it seems like, and we'll touch on that when I get to the voting. The lesser of two evils. Yeah, they're both evil,
Yep.
unfortunately,
Yep.
and I think especially the Republican side is used to being let down and being strung along, but I don't think it's ever been this blatant, at least in my lifetime that I can recall. I mean, maybe George H.W. Bush, read my lips, no new taxes, and then he raised taxes. Well, that was his first term. He didn't get elected. Ross Perot came up, but this is Trump's second term. He can say he wants a third term or whatever. That's not going to happen. He's going for broke, and the mask has come off, unfortunately. And we're seeing, I think, what he actually believed in the whole time, or whether he's been compromised, or maybe it's just Miriam Adelson's $250 million that he's bragged about. Maybe it's just the money, or he's getting away with what seems to be insider trading, and the IRS can't look at his taxes anymore. That's a new thing. It's or the pump and dump crypto scams. It's
Yeah.
almost too much.
Yeah. I mean, why don't you go ahead and jump into the voting thing? Because that's a
Yeah.
great segue.
Yep. So, and like I alluded to, so when we vote, are we actually signing off on evil by voting for what we literally call the lesser of two evils? Or are we just being pragmatic? Because after all, even especially politicians, but everybody's human, nobody's perfect. But I'm going to argue, I think where we stand now, at this point in most cases, voting's not just merely useless. We're actually supporting and I think maybe even spiritually signing off on a corrupt system that's run by evil men. And I I saw a great meme the other day. I don't know if you've seen No Time to Die, the James Bond movie, but there's a scene. He's at an island somewhere, and it's a self-sacrificial scene where he's standing there and he's looking up to the sky as missiles are about to rain down, and just with a blank stare on his face. But the caption says, when one half of your country is cheering on another stupid war for Israel, and the other half is protesting for open borders and kids chopping their dicks off. I mean, if that doesn't say it, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, you could add many other things there besides just the stupid war for Israel. Both sides have so many blemishes that it's almost too much to talk about at this point. So, I mean, it's either we're in perpetual war or a state of degeneracy. And as the parties go back and forth, it seems that we're just uh, getting worse and worse morally, culturally, and we're also, sending our boys off to a war that in no way helps our country. Those seem to be our options, and in my opinion, they're both evil. And I think with Trump, the illusion that we would have someone like a white knight coming to save us. Nobody's coming to save us, and that's kind of what I get on in the rest of this part of the presentation is just about. Um, it's not even about voting. We have to do things um, that help us locally uh, to protect our families. I mean, whatever their platitudes may be, our quote unquote representatives, they seem to just be hired guns of global powers, be those banking dynasties, oligarchs, multinational corporations. They're really, um, I mean, if you just look at things, it seems like they're parasites that are trying to drain the last few drops of our from the dying corpse of what used to be a great nation and a noble civilization. Yeah, Um, I know that's very inspirational, but I do think that there is hope, obviously. But we can't be complacent while we keep pursuing the same losing strategies that's gotten us to this point, which is vote the bums out, vote, vote, vote. This is the most important election of our lifetime. How many times have we heard that?
Yeah, I mean it's such a science, and there's so much money behind it, and I mean people don't realize something that has always struck me as interesting, and that I feel like a lot of people don't realize about being the president of the United States is how powerful, absolute powerful that role is, and that people will do anything for to even be close for influence. And I'm talking anything. I mean,
Yeah,
it is it is scary the role of that. But even even our local elections, it's become a science, and just through manufacturing the process of getting who they need in those places. And I actually saw an interesting quote about George Soros, or from George Soros,
hmm,
and he said that he gets way more ROI, like
yeah,
thousands or millions of times of ROI from local small elections than he gets off the big ones. And that's why he dumps so much money into these judges and these,
DAs.
smaller elections. And yeah, DAs are that, that you, or DAs that you don't really think about it, flies under the radar. And the next time, next thing you know, he owns entire cities.
Yeah,
And and the manufacturing behind that, people don't realize what goes into it. And even like we're talking about mass, that, but even on a lower level, you know um it can get scary. I mean, even you have the wrong sheriff in the put in, and all of a sudden they're letting criminals go. And they're eroding the United States off these high ROI elections that people just let fly under the radar. It's scary stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, they've done a great job with voting, where you're never voting for real change. You're never voting for someone who really is out for the small guy. They say they are, but they've done a
Sure.
really good job of manufacturing, who we even get in front of us.
That's totally right. And what I'm going to focus on here moving forward is just about uh, your community, not necessarily running for local office or voting locally, but just how we can, uh, protect ourselves and our families and just know our neighbors because we've been so atomized. Everybody's on the internet. Everybody thinks that they've got, your best friend is some anon account. Like we have to get back to what made this country great in the first place, and what I think that actually is. And for all his faults, I think it's the Jeffersonian idea of American society. So what we call progress now has made it where it's like almost impossible for the majority of Americans to become that ideal Jeffersonian gentleman, yeoman, farmer again. But I think that each family, because that's self-reliance, but I think that each family can take steps to secure their livelihoods outside of the system, and it seems to be a crumbling economic and political system, at least crumbling at the national level, and then to your point, more and more locally, at least as politics goes. But we do have to be responsible for our family's basic physiological needs like food, water, shelter, clothing, security, that base level stuff. And I mean, most people don't have the space to like grow a large garden that can sustain their entire family, but I mean, even somebody in an apartment, and I would say if you can get out of the city centers, go try and get some land. But even if you have an apartment and that's where you're at right now, you can supplement what you're buying at the grocery store with, I mean, a few small plants on your balcony or windowsill. You can buy bags of rice, store them in, like sealed buckets. Do the same thing with beans. I mean, not my favorite meal, but that'll get you out of a pickle. It's not a forever solution, but it can provide you some autonomy during an emergency, and it gives you time to calculate your next move without having to panic. I mean, if they shut down the country again, like in during COVID, or there's an economic collapse, or AI takes your job, you're not going to have to be in a bread line begging for scraps on day one. So I think
Right.
that's important for us to think about. Do what you can, put a little away um, when you have the extra money, and you have to be forward thinking. So that's the food, but water, I mean, is even more important. You can live longer without food than without water. So, I mean, just throw some packs of bottled water in the pantry, fill you some jugs with filtered water. I know in some places this is illegal, but collect rainwater. Screw it, who cares? Like, now there's a
Uh, that is crazy to me. It's illegal to collect rainwater. It fell on
well,
my land.
it's falling from the sky. Now the sky may
Yeah.
be geoengineered with who knows what up there, so you really need
Yeah.
to get your filter situation figured out. But yeah, that's just the nature of, and that's not a, to your point, that's not a national issue. Those are local principalities that have outlawed collecting
Yeah.
rainwater, which is
Right.
seems to be the most ridiculous thing
Well,
ever.
Colorado, I know Colorado had done it when I used to live in Colorado, and I know Colorado had made that illegal.
What's the justification for that?
Well, because the rain, it's my understanding, I may be wrong, but from what I've been told, because I have asked that question before, is that the rainwater in Colorado, basically goes down the Colorado Basin into Lake Mead and, further down. So basically,
Hmm.
Colorado is, the main source. The snowfall there is one of the main sources for water in like Los Angeles and Las
Okay.
Vegas and Lake Mead, Phoenix, you know. So
But how much rainwater that you're collecting from your roof that you're putting, I mean, and you're going to have a limited amount of whatever receptacle you've got,
yeah,
how much is that really going to
it's
change Los
not.
Angeles's, water
Yeah,
supply? It's total
right.
crap. It's so that we won't be self-reliant, and they'll come up with any excuse to stop that.
Yeah,
But at some point, if it's a matter of life or death, I don't care what the law is. People are going to be putting buckets out. I mean, if you have to survive, that's take me to jail. You know.
yeah, 100%.
So, But I really think the self-reliance is important and how, we because the voting thing is it's like a religious ritual now. It's not even really functional, I don't think, especially with both sides being, a different side of the same coin, two wings of the same bird, the mono party, whatever you want to call it. But I mean, we have to be able to take care of ourselves and our families. That's our number one priority in our job. So that also includes, acquiring and training with the means to defend yourself and your family. I mean, we still have the Second Amendment for I don't know how much longer, so you got to use it. And I don't mean use it by going out there and being crazy, but have the if things really do go bad, you're going to have to not wait on the law. Like when they say, when seconds matter, the police are minutes away. That's
Right. Yeah.
that's
That's
just the
I
way
love
it
that
goes.
quote. It's the
Yeah,
truth. Yeah.
it's such common sense, and that's why I'm in Texas, and we have castle doctrine, stand your ground law. Uh, Texas itself is changing for the worse, but that's still it's common sense. It's part of the long-standing uh, jurisprudence, I guess, of English common law that you have the right to defend yourself. That's, you know, property rights and self-defense. That's what this
Yep.
country and the West was built on. Some other things, you may not be able to communicate with cell phones if something happens to the towers or the grid or something like that. So do you at least get some walkie-talkies? Do you go all out and become a ham radio operator? I don't know. That's that's up to you. And I would also say consider having some emergency cash. I mean, obviously the paper money, but even something that has held its value over a long time, something like silver that you could possibly use in a person-to-person transaction if something happens to the electronic payment rails or you get canceled, you get debanked. You need to have ways of doing commerce that are not linked to the digits on the screen, uh, some real means. And I really do like cash. I think that uh, cash is so important because there's a privacy aspect to it. It's physical, and I think that as we move further along into the panopticon lifestyle that they want us all to use, 15-minute cities, all these things, you're going to be limited to what you can buy, where you can buy it from, and worst case scenario, they can shut off your account.
You know, I think two other things that if you can store it correctly, which will be of exponential value in wild, crazy times,
Hmm.
um, ammo and whiskey.
Yeah, definitely
Yeah,
liquor.
liquor for sure, and
Because
ammo.
yeah,
Yeah,
and ammo could even and ammo, to that point is it's a small unit that is usable, that doesn't go bad. Yeah, to your point, if you store it correctly, and you could use that as a currency.
yeah,
Not as many people anymore that I notice smoke cigarettes. So they talk about in prison or in uh,
yeah.
a war camp, cigarettes became currency. But to your point, anything can become a currency if it is valued as a medium of exchange, but also is you can throw it in the rifle if you need
I
it.
mean, yeah, and I mean, it was that way. I mean,
Yeah,
I know a lot of people look at this, but when you look back at, you go to the bar and order a
a
shot.
shot. Yep.
The reason was it was you traded a bullet, one shot, and they gave you an ounce and a half of booze, and that's where
Yep.
that whole nomenclature came from. Absolutely. So I mean, you look back at, you know, what do they say? History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. I mean, look back at what it looked like, what it was, and it could be a very similar situation. Um, and I think this is another good segue of, we're talking about, um, it, survival and survival, situations. And I think this is a great way to kind of jump into this next thing that we're going to talk about. And these are these deep underground military bases and expanding on that a little bit and we all we talk about Elon Musk, and it's like, what are these, even Mark Zuckerberg is, famously building this like underground bunker in Hawaii. Jeff Bezos is doing it in Texas, where he's also building some weird clock in a mountain. And all these strange things that, don't really make a lot of sense. Why would Jeff Bezos put a giant clock in a mountain? And all these, why are they building all these underground bunkers and all this? And it's like the upper echelon elite here that are doing this. And, it kind of got me thinking here. And I'm looking at Elon Musk. And, it seems at surface level that he's building everything for us for, um, to go to other planets. But, he's also got the Boring Company. And so let me just kind of start diving into this. I'm going to start going through some bullet points with everybody to give you where this theory's going here. So DUMBs, they're deep underground military bases. The Pentagon admits to several of these, especially Cheyenne Mountain. Everybody, that was famously on X-Files. You got Mount Weather in Virginia. You got Site R, Raven Rock in Pennsylvania. The Cog bunker underneath Greenbrier Resort. Now we have a new bunker that's going in, under the ballroom at the
Uh-huh.
White House. And there's officially um, hundreds, if not thousands, of classified DUMBs. You know, um, Paul Schneider, he was a whistleblower, geologist, self-claimed government engineer, um, who in the mid 90s said there was 129 active DUMBs averaging 3 miles or 2.66 miles deep, connected by mag level tunnels. He claimed each cost between 17 and 26 billion dollars, per one to build. He died under suspicious circumstances in 1996. They officially called it a suicide, but friends
Sure.
say he was strangled with rubber tubing. Um, Estimated 5,800 miles of tunnel network, according to alternative researchers like Richard Sauter with a PhD, wrote the book Underground Bases and Tunnels. There's a repeated name in every theory, which is Bechtel, massive
Mm.
private construction conglomerate, allegedly the prime contractor of most of these underground buildouts. Very quiet, very secretive, deeply tied to defense and energy. And there's above ground tells for all these. Denver International Airport, the murals, the runway patterns, the unexplained construction overruns, and then Cheyenne Mountain expansion budget that vanished from public records. Uh, Large unexplained earthquakes in non-fault zones. And there's which is something you see with tunnel boring. And so why this matters and how this is all connected, like Elon Musk, is these DUMBs and these large underground cities and these tunnel networks that go, miles and miles. You think about the infrastructure and the building that we've seen in places like China and Singapore. My God, is beautiful, and America is vastly behind technology in tech, in beauty, and everything.
Go
Like
to an airport.
America is ugly. Our airports are garbage, and you go to these other places, and their infrastructure is absolutely incredible. Yet we are the richest country. Where is this money going? And everybody knows famously on September 10th, 2001, uh, was it Rumsfeld who came out and said we
Yeah.
lost like trillions of
Trillions.
dollars?
And
So
then the Pentagon that housed that information happened to be the part of the Pentagon that happened to be hit was where they kept the info on the accounting department.
yeah, exactly. So poof,
Yeah.
very, very convenient for them. And so this is why this matters to this concept that I'm going to bring up here is, these huge tunnel networks and these underground cities, for the elite or whoever's using them. It only makes sense if the surface of the earth is going to become uninhabitable. So it's already, you know, it's either already happened, like Cold War contingency, or it's expected to happen. The candidate cataclysms in the war, nuclear exchange, Carrington event, solar flares, asteroid,
Hmm.
supervolcano like Yellowstone, a bioweapon release, AI singularity, climate collapse. All these things could cause, um, absolute chaos, at
Above
surface
ground.
level. Yeah. And so the richest, most powerful people they don't build $40 million New Zealand bunkers, like Peter Thiel or what Zuckerberg's building. and stockpile decades of supplies because they're worried about politics. They're worried about continuity.
Yeah,
That's a whole different thing. And so then you know, tie in Elon Musk and his, let's call it his tech stack here. He's got the Boring Company, which is tunneling at industrial scale. His public story is they're solving traffic in Vegas. Okay. Um, Capability is they say they're cheap, fast, scalable tunnel construction, and the Vegas loop is proof of the concept. You know, if you can dig under the strip, you can dig under anywhere. He's building this stuff. He's already doing it. He's open about it. Everybody knows Boring Company's real. It's not a conspiracy. You have Tesla Optimus, humanoid robots. Elon says they'll do anything: labor, manufacturing, household work. Why do you need a billion humanoid robots if we have existing population? You know,
because they
e-
don't breathe air.
exactly. You got Starlink, resilient global communications. Cell towers and fiber go down in cataclysms. Satellite mesh networks survive everywhere. Whoever controls Starlink controls the communication in the afterwards. And Elon Musk has already turned it on and off in war zones already. We've seen him do it in Ukraine. We've seen him do it in Iran.
Hmm.
And then you've got Neuralink, direct neural interface. Um, you know, you're controlling things mentally. His public story is helping paraplegics, long-term capability, command and control bandwidth between humans, or what's left of them, and the robotic surface workforce. He's controlling the workforce. Then you've got SpaceX. Could be, SpaceX, gets the satellites out. I mean, that's really what that's for, is
Hmm.
getting all the satellites out there and creating the infrastructure around this. We're led to believe that, he wants to go to Mars, and he may do that as a, it could be, but it sounds to me like it's purely performative, but yeah, I mean, that is really built to be, deploy all of his satellites to manage the infrastructure around, all of his technology. Then
And,
you've
and
got,
well,
go
real
ahead.
quick, what you said about Mars rang a bell with me because he keeps saying that we want to go to Mars because we're going to destroy the planet. We need to be
Yeah.
interplanetary. So,
Yep.
yeah, if we're going to destroy the planet, it's probably more feasible in the short term to have underground cities and things like that to survive before he can build a Mars colony. But he is
Yep.
openly worried about the survival of the species, quote
Yeah,
unquote.
the Tesla Cybertruck has a mode on it that you can set it that's called bioweapon defense mode. Yeah, and with
What
the
does it
same,
do?
I don't know the specific. I
It's
think
probably
it
just a
blocks off outside air and like makes it so you can get through without.
wow.
Yeah,
I had no.
yeah,
I
and then
saw
and then
wave
the
mode. I've seen that
yeah
where idiots are
yeah
driving into a lake with their truck, but I
yeah
didn't know it had that
yeah bioweapon
nifty
defense
feature.
mode. It's real. And then you've got the orchestra. Then you have the brains and the orchestration behind it, with this, which is XAI or Grok, and which is again like that orchestration layer, the AI brain that runs the whole network when the lights go out. So Musk, he's the only person on Earth who simultaneously owns tunneling, satellite communication, humanoid robots, brain-machine interface, electric transport, off-board rockets, and frontier AI. And he, I mean, why would you choose those specific things to build?
Well,
And
the
it's
the guy is not dumb, no pun intended. He knows
no, he's not. Yep,
what very likely could be in our future.
yep. And I mean, coincidentally, man, it's a complete post-cataclysm like civilization toolkit. It's exactly what it
Yeah.
is. And so, I mean, like you said, Musk, here's another quote. He said, "I think there's a non-zero chance of extinction." And he said it like 100 times. Like he says, it's you know going to happen. His foundation bought thousands of acres in remote Texas, including land near Boca Chica. He put Space City or SpaceX there. Um, there's the convenient overlap, extremely remote, defensible with a private launch pad. The Boring Company quietly relocated its headquarters from California to Bastrop, Texas, in the middle of nowhere, near the Tesla's Gigafactory and
Hmm.
SpaceX. Um, Trump mucks, the Trump and Elon reconciliation and their breakup cycles. I mean, it looks like positioning, not personality. Like they're
Okay.
they're scheming something around. Um, why would the richest man in the world spend his late 50s working 100-hour weeks if he believed the future was going to be, normal? This guy's like nonstop working towards, you know,
Yeah,
making
he's on a
sure
mission.
he's on a mission. And, you know, I don't think he's building it for us. He's building it for them after all this goes down. And a couple things that I'd like to also say is, I remember when AOC came out with the Green New Deal and how stupid it was. But then I was like reading a lot of it, and there's strange things like all new buildings are built like built using natural, not ingredients, but using natural tools, or not having windows that are made of certain materials, and everything that's in there is very more geared towards a rebuild than like moving forward.
Hmm.
Because you don't see buildings like how much when they pass that, what are they gonna, refab New York City to follow these standards? Absolutely not. And so why would this language be put within this bill? Like they're not going to go back and, so it's like even if it's everything moving forward, like you're still going to have an entire city that's been there for, 200 years.
Not if it
That,
looks like Gaza.
exactly. And so if everything is broken down, now all of a sudden the Green New Deal and that weird language within there makes a lot of sense. And, there's someone I highly suggest everybody follow this guy. He's great. I've been listening to him for about 10 years. He's really starting to gain a lot of momentum. His channel on Twitter and on YouTube is fantastic. It used to be called Suspicious Observers. Now it's called Space Weather News. His name's Ben Davidson, and he studies and walks through, and he's an expert on disaster cycles, but he stumbled upon that through his study of the sun and the sun cycles and
Hmm.
basically space weather. And what do they call it, the is it a EMP that the sun puts out? Anyway, so he would study those, and he started finding a correlation between Earth's earthquakes and these sunspots that were blasting things at the Earth. And so he actually has been able to, with some some certainty, he's been able to gauge when we were getting like some earthquakes because off of this stuff and like all the geomagnetic weather that hits us. So, and a lot of the things that he talks about is that we are like we're late. Like something's coming. And if you look at the magnetic poles, they have moved more in the last 50 years than they have moved in the past like 5,000 years before it. And so
Hmm.
he is leaning towards it being a pole shift.
Interesting. And yeah, that was a huge thing that I had heard about years ago was the pole shift, and I didn't understand how that was going to happen or why. But yeah, it's all this stuff. It is cyclical, just like the rise and fall of empires. I mean, and a lot of that may have to do with you could probably track political cycles via
Yeah.
sun cycles as well, because I think it probably does something to our physiology or our psyche as well. Uh, yeah, a lot of interesting stuff with the natural phenomenon, how that affects our cyclical
And I mean,
cyclical nature.
yeah, and you go back to, what is it? I always mess this up. Göbekli Tepe, is it? Um, and like Machu Picchu.
Okay,
Um, I'm chopping that one name. I think it's Göbekli
Techno
Tepe or
Techlon or something.
something. But all these ancient sites that like we don't understand the technology, and now they're starting to do uh, it's some sort of tracking. And I was just looking at something where somebody on Twitter has an account, and they're basically using this technology to go over different areas, and they're finding all these strange anomalies within like United States all over the world underneath our soil, where and a lot of our geography or geology looks like there's been major shifts and changes. Obviously, um, as the world is. gotten older, it's going to shift, it's going to move. The iron core is going to do things, and there's going to, and pole shifts happen every 10,000 years roughly. And so, the last one that probably happened, they're thinking it was like 12,000 years ago. And so I think that there is a group, and so there's a theory out there called breakaway civilization, and it's a group of these people who, the elites who basically are breaking away. And so, they already don't follow our laws. We know that they don't follow our rules. They do whatever the hell they want. And, they're basically doing everything they can to break away from civilization, and they'll be the stewards onto the next level of, the next round of humans, whenever that is,
The
or
trans
however that
Yeah,
looks.
they'll be transhumans with
Yep.
robot brain, godlike entities, so they
Yep.
think.
And so, yeah, very interesting stuff. Everybody look into all this stuff. I really suggest you look up Ben Davidson, Space Weather News on Twitter. He's phenomenal on YouTube. Great channel. He does a every morning. He does this really cool kind of recap on what's happening with the sun, and it's almost like you know I used to wake up in the morning as a kid, and I'd have my mom would have Weather Channel on with that
Hmm.
elevator music, and I'd always listen to it. His morning thing is kind of like that. It's funny, like
That's cool.
just some about his voice and everything. Like I listen to it almost every morning. It's a good listen. Normally they're like 3 to 5 minutes of just like what's happening with our sun. It's pretty neat. And so, speaking of the sun and space and everything, I know we want to touch on UFOs. So now, Lee, let's jump in.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I think that this has to do. I'll tell you pretty much the crux of my position here is that UFOs are going to be used as a reason to justify global governance. And I have quotes here from Ronald Reagan, John Dewey, a few other people. But whether it's a catastrophe that occurs naturally, whether we blow each other up, whether we are invaded by aliens, all of these lead to a justification for consolidation of global power, and we do have the technology now to implement that. But and the reason this is important is because the first tranche of UFO, they now call them UAP. These files they were released by the Department of War on May 8th of this year, and a second tranche was just released earlier this week. And what I would ask is the purpose of this quote unquote disclosure? Is it merely a deflection from, the faltering Iran adventurism or the president's sinking approval ratings, or has there been a longer term plan to use UFO disclosure for a greater purpose? And I will make that case. So Ronald Reagan in 1987, he addressed the United Nations in New York, and here's a quote. This was during the Cold War, so it was in the context of us and the Soviet Union. He goes, can we and all nations not live in peace? In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bond. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. How quickly our differences would vanish and we would come together. Another guy, his name's John Dewey. It's not I was mistaken. I thought he created the Dewey Decimal System, but this guy was an American. Yeah, he was in the early 20th century, American philosopher, psychologist, and an education reformer. Uh, one of the most prominent American scholars of the first half of the 20th century, and he went to the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace at the Imperial Japanese Mission. This is way back in 1917. And I would, as an aside, I think that we have been primed for this alien thing since, War of the Worlds, things like that. But back in 1917, he said, uh, quote, someone remarked that the best way to unite all the nations on this globe would be an attack from some other planet. In the face of such an alien enemy, people would respond with a sense of their unity of interest and purpose. We have the next thing to that at this present time. In spite of geographical distance, unlike speech, diverse religion, and hitherto independent aims, nations from every continent have formed for what the time being is nothing less than a world state, an immense cooperative action on behalf of civilization. So I really do think that we have been given breadcrumbs that this is what they're trying to do. And there, I do think that there is something to the UFOs. There's something to aliens, things like that, and I'll get into that. But it's being used for uh, the nicest way you can put it is a nefarious purpose. Are you
Yeah,
familiar with Werner von Braun?
of course. Yeah, he is the he is a Nazi, and then
Hmm.
he used Operation Paperclip and came
That's
over and
right.
he was the beginner, or he's the one who founded NASA.
Yep, because the Germans were way ahead in missile technology and things like that. So we got a few in paperclip. I think that we probably got more and the better of their scientists, but the Soviet Union got a few too, and hence the space race. But yeah, he was a German aerospace engineer, like you said, Nazi party, and he was covertly brought over here and developed rocket technology here for us. So um, he had an assistant, or I'll tell you who Carol Rosen is. So von Braun died a while ago, but back in 2000, Dr. Carol Rosen, she was the first female executive of an aerospace company ever, and she worked as a corporate manager for Fairchild Industries. Von Braun was there at the time as well, and she served as his spokesperson. And she testified about some alleged warnings that Werner von Braun gave her regarding a false flag alien invasion, and he saw it as a threat, not necessarily for world government, but so that we could weaponize space, which, to your point earlier, is happening. Elon's really involved in that, but Space Force, all those things like that. So she says that his purpose during the last years of his life, he was dying of cancer, but was to educate the public and decision makers about why space-based weapons are stupid, dangerous, too costly, unnecessary, blah blah blah. But what she couches as practically a deathbed speech to her. She says, he educated me about those concepts and who the players were in this game. He gave me the responsibility, since he was dying, of continuing this effort to prevent the weaponization of outer space. What was most interesting to me was a repetitive sentence that he said to me over and over again during the 4 years that I had the opportunity to work with him. He said the strategy that was being used to educate the public and decision makers was to use scare tactics. This is how we identify an enemy. And the funniest one of all is what he called aliens or extraterrestrials. That would be the final scare. And over during the 4 years that I knew him and was giving speeches for him, he would bring up that last card. Quote, and remember, Carol, the last card is the alien card. We are going to have to build spaceways weapons against the aliens, and all of it is a lie. I
Yeah,
mean, that he and I believe on his tombstone it says something about
I was
from
just gonna bring
Genesis.
this up. I've got it
Yeah,
pulled up. Yeah,
yeah,
so
pull it up.
because and I'm not a flat earther, but this
Me
is a
neither.
lot of flat earthers like get
They
into
love
this
it.
because yeah, so Werner von Braun's tombstone, it said his name, and then it just says Psalms 19:1, and Psalms 19:1 is the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork.
Funny for a guy who was trying to get out into outer space to talk about the firmament, but he could have seen that as just an
Yeah,
allegory for
yeah.
that. But
It's pretty. That's pretty funny. And just a side note that I also
yeah,
think is funny. So everybody for years, like is UFO, UFO, UFO. Do you know where UAP the first time the public heard that term? Who said it out loud?
tell me.
Hillary Clinton said it in the deposition, called it UAPs, and that's where UAP was the first time the public had heard that term, and it
And
was
that's
a whole
unidentified
hot dog.
aerial phenomena,
That's
correct?
correct. Yep. And she just randomly was like, said it in passing, UAPs. And everybody's like, what the fuck's a UAP? And
Well,
yeah, so,
that's
but
probably
old
what
Hill
they've been
Dog.
calling it. Yeah, under in the classified hearings
Yep.
and all
Yep.
that stuff. This one, okay, so this is last thing just about the UFO thing. A guy that I'll let the audience know is a huge inspiration for us. One of the first people that we talked about, to where you and I, when we met Brother Joseph, uh, that we were kind of on the same page as Milton William Bill Cooper. So
Wild
Freedom's
Bill
great.
Cooper.
Bill Cooper, man. For the folks who don't know him, he was an American conspiracy theorist, radio broadcaster, and an author that was known for his 1991 book, Behold a Pale Horse. So he actually got into the conspiracy realm as a ufologist, and he was trying to uh, figure out what was going on. So he had been in the Office of Naval Intelligence. He claimed that he had seen some strange craft when he was, I think, off Vietnam somewhere. But then he was also given a bunch of classified material to brief his commanding officer. And he said, for many years, I sincerely believed that an extraterrestrial threat existed and that it was the most important driving force behind world events. I was wrong, and for that I most deeply and humbly apologize. He then said, I've since come to believe that the materials that I viewed in the Navy is not correct, but in fact a deception, and I believe what's flying in our skies is of human origin. So he thought that the UFOs were just advanced technology that hadn't been released to the public, and we had to have a cover story for what these were.
Yeah, and a little more background about, Bill Cooper, William
Hmm.
Cooper. Bill Clinton in the 90s called him the most dangerous man in America,
Hmm.
and he was murdered by FBI agents out in his driveway who were pretending to be kids, like partying in a pickup truck. He went out there to ask the kids to be quiet, and they put one in him. And so he was a shortwave radio guy. I mean, he has just a wealth of knowledge, and there's so much you can go down his different rabbit holes and just different things that he was involved in. And I still have never seen or heard anybody go into the depth that
Nope.
he goes into when it comes to basically tying every conspiracy theory together. And I know one of his, he mentioned it, and I believe, what was it? Not Behold a Pale Horse, but Hour of the Time,
Hour of the Time.
which was his radio show.
You can
He
still
had
find
mentioned
those
in
on
there,
YouTube.
which
I would
you
recommend it.
should go listen to him, man. He is, even his voice, everything about it is captivating. Even, man, even the intro to that, like, it's
Dogs
just,
barking and
yeah,
sirens
and
going
sirens.
off. It gets you. You're ready to
Yeah,
hear Bill talk after
it
that.
puts you in the right mind state. But um, he had mentioned in one of those that he had saw a UFO come out of the water. He was on a
Hmm.
ship and he saw a UFO come out of the water, and that was the beginning of him. That was kind of the beginning of Bill Cooper. He saw that, and it spawned all of his studies and all the research that he did, who turned him into, in my opinion, a great man. Um, you know, Again, just the depth he goes into. I mean, you can listen for hours and hours and hours of everything. And um, he's been one of the people where you see things happen 20 years later that he was saying where you thought there was no way it could happen, and 20 years later, here we are. And it's scary. It's
Well,
terrifying.
speaking of some of his predictions, the I believe just a few years before, or a few months before the September 11th attack, he literally
Yeah.
said, "Why why is CNN interviewing Osama bin Laden? The CIA can't find him. They're going to pin something on this guy." And he called it out. Um,
Well, no,
and
yeah.
when he
Go ahead. Sorry.
well and well when he was murdered, his original the original warrant for them to arrest him was dated. They were supposed to arrest him on September 11th, but obviously things happened and there were some other
Yeah.
things. So then they came later, and yeah, he was armed. He thought that people, if you remember in the 90s, there was a militia movement. He wasn't part of a militia, but I
Yeah.
think he touted
A
that
lot of
we
a
should
lot of
be
militia
armed.
people listen to him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they loved him.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Well, he
just
didn't just with 9/11, he didn't, it wasn't vague. He said they're going to fly planes into the World Trade Center,
yeah,
and he said,
blame it
and
on
they're going to pin
Osama
it,
bin Laden.
they're going to blame it on Osama bin Laden, and don't you dare believe a second of that.
Quote.
Yeah. I mean, he said it, and then yeah, they killed him a couple weeks after 9/11.
Just amazing
And
stuff. So
he talked a lot about Freemasonry, and that's
the occult,
another.
mystery religions.
Absolutely, and a whole thing that we're talking about Werner von Braun and that whole quote about bringing people together, and it's the only way that we can, get past our differences. But then you tie in, Albert Pike, who, the godfather of Freemasonry, the only Confederate general who still has a statue up in Washington, D.C., Albert Pike. Um, he, there's some people say it's not true, and some people say it is true or it's been debunked, but apparently he wrote this letter to, let's see, it was to Mazzini, Mazzini, and he talks about, and he wrote it in 1871, and it's the basically Illuminati plan for the three world wars, and he goes through the First World War, Second World War, everything is, exactly right, and then the Third World War, he basically says that we've got to um, lead everything to a way where they tear down all the religions, and then I'm going to read the direct quote. After they tear down all the religions, um, people are. It says, let's see, they'll be that moment will be without compass or direction, anxious for an ideal, but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out into the public view. The manifestation will result in the general reactionary movement, which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time.
That is a
And
perfect
so,
segue to the next part of the UFO conspiracy here. And it is, he mentions Lucifer. It has to do with demonology and Satanism, things like that. So I want to go quickly because we are getting to time, but I want to touch on Joe Jordan. So this guy is the president of what's called CE4 Research Group. It's an alien abduction investigation team, and he's been part of what's called MUFON. I think that Cooper was involved in that, and that's the Mutual UFO Network. Field investigator. He'd been doing that since 1992. Well, he interviewed an abductee who said that his experience was ended. So the alien, quote unquote, that was assaulting him fled when he called on the name of Jesus Christ. And this was a revelation to Joe Jordan because he said in all the research that we'd read, never had we read where anybody could stop an abduction experience. Now, most of the researchers said that the experience couldn't be stopped, but here he was. He had someone who said it could. So Joe reached out to the top researchers in the field, and many of them confirmed, of course, off the record, that they had come across similar cases. Um, and he asked them this, and they had two answers. He said, "Well, why haven't you shared this? That the name of Jesus Christ can stop an alien abduction?" And he said one pretty common answer. They really didn't know what to make of it. But on second one, a lot of people said, "Well, we just didn't want to go there because it might affect our credibility in the research community." I mean, everybody talks about government cover-ups. This was a cover-up amongst the researchers themselves because of the kind of worldview that they had. I mean, most Christians aren't probably hunting UFOs, but over the next 10 years, Joe worked with over 400 abduction cases that matched that first experience. 400 that they could stop the experiences by calling out the name of Jesus. Now, he boiled down the findings about why people experience these abductions, and there were three commonalities. You either asked for it, you were, I don't know why you would do that, but you wanted to know more or something, or you were already involved in occult or satanic activity, or there was some kind of generational curse, like your parents maybe had some kind of occult involvement or things like that. So I think it's clear from those over 400 documented experiences that the aliens that we've heard so much about that they're pumping to us now they're actually demons, and they're just manifesting in a manner that is going to lend itself to a final satanic deception on the world that's going to bring in Ronald Reagan and John Dewey's wonderful world government. Um, so I've got a couple scripture verses just to give you an idea. So the Apostle Paul wrote to the Corinthians, quote, "For such are false prophets, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light. Therefore, it's no great thing if his ministers also transform themselves into ministers of righteousness, whose end will be according to their work. Well, if Satan can change his appearance, I think that it's not a far stretch to say that his minions can also appear in whatever light they wish to appear to deceive. Um, and I think that the calling on Christ, I think there's a lesson on how these people dealt with aliens. That's a microcosm of these people's experiences, but I think that it can be applied to the larger issues that we're talking about in this podcast that we face as a civilization, because these do, when you're being oppressed by an alien, or you're just looking at what's happening to our civilization, it seems like these insurmountable oppressors can't be dealt with, but the aliens or the demons can be driven out in the name and authority of Jesus Christ. And I think that that's really, in my worldview, why the West is so under attack. Because prior to the end of the post-war consensus or some earlier enemy campaigns, the West was called Christendom. It was
Yep.
where the gospel lived, and there is still a remnant here in the West, especially in Europe and America. So I think that the reason for the UFO deception is public. It's to unite the world against an outside alien threat, bringing all the nations of the earth together into a single unified world government. And yeah, the Bible says the Antichrist, who would be the ruler of the unified government and religion that these guys really long for, cannot manifest while the Holy Spirit still resides on earth. Or that's at least my reading of this next passage. It's Paul again to the Thessalonians. He said, "Now you know what is restraining, that he may be revealed in his own time. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work, and only he, capital He, who now restrains will do so until he's taken out of the way. And then the lawless one will be revealed, who the Lord will consume with the breath of his mouth and destroy with the brightness of his coming." So I think all this is just leading uh, to your point about Pike's quote that um, that religions can be or faith uh, in religions can be shaken by uh, this these UFOs, this disclosure, and that's gonna lead to the unification under a new religion that um, I think you and me both believe is quote Luciferian.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty interesting stuff. But I feel like that, you know, I don't know. I feel like there's a difference between UFOs and aliens. Like
Oh yeah, the
you know what
UFOs
I
are the
mean?
crafts, and the aliens are the people supposedly
People inside of them
flying the
supposedly,
crafts.
but
Yeah,
I don't know. But you look at things like CERN, and like a lot of people have been talking and saying that that's actually bringing, you know,
interdimensional
yeah,
portals.
interdimensional, conversations, or like they've even talked about. So I remember something I thought was super interesting. This was maybe 10 years ago, but there was a company called D-Wave, and Google owns D-Wave now. But anyway, it was this supercomputer, and it was at the time the strongest supercomputer in the world. And basically, it was it had proven, because of how it was doing its quantum computing, that it was using other dimensions in its um, equations. And so it had proven, this computer, because of how it was functioning and coming up with these answers, that it was actually pulling from other dimensions. And this is, you can actually search and Google this. And the CEO of D-Wave even came out and said it in a TED Talk. And so then you look at CERN and things like that. I feel like there's entities out there that travel and move, and they I don't know if they necessarily need UFOs. And I feel like a lot of these UFOs that we see, like I do agree completely, like these entities are Luciferian, or they're demonic, whatever they are, whether they're coming from another dimension or,
Yeah,
whatever, from seances, or from, CERN particle colliders, whatever. I do think that they are, uh, entities that are probably Luciferian or they're like demons. But with that being said, I think the government has had flying UFOs, whether they got them from some entity or what, but I think that the government has been running and using UFOs and have had this, zero point technology, zero point propulsion technologies for a long time. We just haven't known about it. Some things that would lead me to that. I know Sean Ryan's podcast, he had a guy on there named Michael Herrera who was a Black Ops, I believe he was a Black Ops Marine, but let's see, he was former U.S. Marine. Yeah. So in episode 66 on Sean Ryan's show, he talked about seeing a large UAP or UFO in 2009 on a humanitarian mission in Indonesia after an earthquake or tsunami. And he saw this UFO and Black Ops personnel guarding it and loading children onto it.
Oh my.
Um, and so you talk about like breakaway civilization. Do they, are they trafficking kids in these? And, this is a highly decorated Marine saying that he saw some, people and them loading boxes of things and children onto these UAPs. And so that episode is Sean Ryan Show, episode 66. Check it out. And so, yeah, I mean, it's interesting stuff. I think that, there are people who have fallen into the trap of thinking that this world is all that there is, and
Hmm.
then and or at least this plane of existence, which could be other dimensions, can still be this plane of understanding. And so, they think that that's it, and they're, connecting or summoning or seeking these entities that are out there through different, whether that be, you know, Freemason, which, this all, Freemasonry, Thelema, which came from who was it? The Satanist, Antoine LaVey, famously, sex magic and all that.
Yeah.
All of that
Crowley.
goes back. Yeah, it all goes. Oh, sorry, Aleister Crowley, not Anton LaVey. Aleister Crowley. All that does, all those tie back into the Kabbalah. They all
Yeah.
do, and you can trace that. That is not, Freemason, the 33rd degree, and all that. They all go back into the Kabbalah. Which then, if you look at the origins of the Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism, this goes straight back to Solomon's seal,
Babylonian.
Babylonian, and even when Moses came down from the temple. And he came down from that temple, and they were worshiping the golden calf,
Hmm.
and made the golden calf, which is Moloch or yeah, Moloch's the calf and Minerva's the owl. But anyway, they're worshiping Moloch, and he broke away and sent the other ones away because you can't be here. You don't worship this anymore, and they go to Babylon and they start this Babylonian mystery religion that came through the Canaanites and via the Canaanites. So this religion, which is you know came from the Canaan or the Canaanites, flowed into the Kabbalah, and these people are still practicing this, and probably some of it works. I mean, King Solomon became the most powerful, richest man in the world ever, even
Hmm.
even even extrapolated out to today's terms, like Elon Musk doesn't even come close. And he had all these regions, and even if you look at Solomon seal, it's Star of David. Star
Well,
of David was not in the Bible,
and
or it's not
Crowley.
in. Yeah.
No, to your point, yeah, the Star of Remphan, I think some people
Star of
say that
Remphan,
that's
exactly. Yeah,
actually
it's
what
the
it
Star
is.
of Remphan. It's not Star David. Yeah.
Well, and to get back on
Well, the Star of,
Crowley and
sorry, let me correct that. The
yeah,
Star of
go ahead.
David is actually the Star of Remphan.
What we
And
call
so
the
you
Star of
see it
David.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just to put a dot on it. So, Aleister Crowley, I'm glad you brought him up because I hadn't remembered this. Yeah, he was big into sex magic, doing drugs and all these different rituals to talk to entities. Even the CIA had in MK Ultra they had what was called psychonauts, and they explored altered states of uh, of their mind and whatever, and spoke to these beings. But Crowley drew a picture of the first demon that he ever encountered with, and it looks a lot like a gray alien.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So interesting stuff. These are very deep topics that
It
we
is.
could go on forever, and that don't have a solid explanation, but it's things that we have to consider,
You
and
know,
they're all
I,
pieces
I'm
to the
gonna
puzzle.
I'm gonna leave this. We're gonna wrap it up here, but I'm gonna leave it at one thing. And there's something really interesting. I think that we should probably touch on this in a later episode. But okay, you've got that Canaanite religion that is hell bent against especially Christianity or whatever
Yeah,
Moses's God was,
yeah.
and then they've become you know the Kabbalah teachings, which then turned into like Freemasonry and Aleister Crowley. But another interesting thing, and all these New Age religion were like Earth and Wiccan in there, but like all this New Age stuff, it all came from somebody named Alice Bailey, and she was like a let's see, she was a British American writer and occultist, and all of her stuff also came from this Canaanite religion, and it was all tied back to the Kabbalah. And so it's interesting because you have Aleister Crowley, you've got Freemason religion, you've got all this New Age stuff, which is prevalent everywhere. I mean, even one of my favorite bands, man, Tool, they've got that all the flower of life and all that stuff. Like you see all that, and it all comes straight back to the Lucis Trust, and it's all straight back to the Kabbalah, which goes straight back to So it's almost like there's the Christianity, and then there's these like 20 religions who actually all tie back down into that Canaanite thing, and those were the people worshiping that golden calf.
Antichrist. And a fun little point here in one of Epstein's emails. I don't know if you remember back in the day, Madonna used to be really into the Kabbalah, and
Yeah,
she is a Gentile, and
yeah.
they're making fun of her in an email like this dumb. I think they literally call her cattle. They're like this dumb
Oh,
cattle thinks
Epstein.
she knows
Yeah,
what she's doing. It's like
yeah,
save that for us, honey.
yeah. I know. Epstein and yeah, who is he talking to in that? It's Epstein and somebody, but yeah, he's bashing, uh, talking trash on Madonna for trying to get into the Kabbalah, saying that
Yeah,
she's just goy.
it's not for you, sweetheart.
So that's a fun topic. We'll get into that. So
Yeah,
this was another great episode. Brother Lee, thanks for being on, man.
it is always a pleasure. I enjoyed it.
All right, everybody. We'll be back next week with more great topics, and give us a like, give us a follow, and yeah, we'll be back next week.